Zixithan walked into the large classroom on the planet Valoris Prime. He was a young student at the Galactic History Academy, one of the most famous schools in the known universe. His blue skin shimmered under the artificial lights as he found his seat near the back of the room. He had 3 hearts, 6 fingers on each hand, and eyes that could see in complete darkness. By galactic standards, he was quite ordinary. His 3 closest friends were already waiting for him. Kiravel was a shardborn, a species made entirely of living crystal. When she spoke, her whole body vibrated and produced musical sounds. Next to her sat Omus, a Valorian who looked like a large blob of green jelly. He had no fixed shape and could stretch or compress his body however he wished. The last member of their group was Telrix, an insectoid from the Chiton Collective. He had 4 arms, compound eyes, and mandibles that clicked when he was thinking hard about something. Professor Velmak entered the room, and the students fell silent. The professor was ancient, even by galactic standards. His species lived for thousands of years, and he had personally witnessed events that most students only read about in old files. His gray skin was wrinkled like old paper, and his movements were slow and careful. Today, the professor announced, "You will begin your final research project. You must investigate a topic that has been removed from standard educational materials. Something the Galactic Council has decided is too dangerous for casual study." The students exchanged excited looks. This sounded far more interesting than their usual lessons about trade agreements and diplomatic protocols. Professor Velnek pressed a button. On his desk, a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a simple classification code, Species 7 Sol. "Your assignment is to research this species," the professor continued. "They are the only beings in galactic history to be permanently banned from participating in any form of organized warfare. You will discover why." Kiravel raised a crystalline hand. "Professor, why would any species be banned from war? War is how territorial disputes are settled. It is natural and normal." The professor's expression did not change. "That is exactly what you must discover. I am granting your study group temporary access to the Forbidden's archive beneath this academy. What you learn there will answer your questions, but I warn you now, some knowledge changes those who possess it. You cannot unlearn what you are about to discover." After class, the 4 friends gathered in a quiet corner of the academy gardens. Strange alien plants surrounded them, their leaves glowing softly in the evening light. "Species 7 Sol," Telrix said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "I have never heard this designation before. It must be very old." Zixithan pulled out his personal datapad and began searching. Most of the results were blocked or redacted. Entire sections of galactic history had been erased or hidden behind security clearances far above his student level. "I found something," he finally announced. Sol is the name of a star, a yellow dwarf in an unremarkable region of the galaxy. The 3rd planet orbiting this star is called Earth. "Earth," Omus repeated, his gelatinous body wobbling with the effort of pronouncing the strange word. "I have heard this name before. It is the homeworld of the humans." Kiravel made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Humans? Those small creatures with the soft skin? I have seen some of them on trading stations. They seem harmless enough. Fragile, even. They only live for about 80 standard years." "That is nothing," Telrix agreed. "My species lives for 300 years minimum. What could such short-lived beings possibly do to warrant a permanent ban from warfare?" Zixithan continued reading the limited information available to him. "It says here that humans first made contact with the galactic community about 200 years ago. They were welcomed into the Trade Federation almost immediately. They seemed eager to learn and cooperate. Then what happened?" Omus asked. "The file ends there." Everything else requires access to the Forbidden's archive. The four friends looked at each other. The Forbidden's archive was legendary among students. It was said to contain records of events so terrible that the Galactic Council had decided the general population should never know about them. Wars that had wiped out entire species. Weapons that could destroy stars. Secrets that could unravel the peace that had held the galaxy together for millennia. "We should go now," Caravel suggested, "before we lose our courage." They made their way to the oldest building on campus. It was built from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Two guards stood at the entrance, their weapons ready. When the students showed their temporary access passes, the guards stepped aside without a word, but their expressions were strange, almost pitying. The elevator descended for nearly 10 minutes. When the doors finally opened, the students found themselves in a vast underground chamber. The walls were made of neutronium, the densest material in the universe. Whatever was stored here was meant to stay here forever. Professor Velnik was waiting for them. He stood next to a crystalline storage unit that pulsed with a soft red light. A warning light. "You have chosen to learn the truth," the professor said. "I respect your curiosity. But before I show you these records, I must ask each of you a question. Do you believe that any species is capable of true evil?" Zixthathan thought about this carefully. "I believe that species do what they must to survive. What seems evil to one might seem necessary to another." The professor nodded slowly. "A wise answer, but not quite complete. What you are about to learn will show you something different. You will see what happens when a species does not distinguish between necessary and excessive. When survival and victory become the same thing in their minds." He activated the storage unit, and the air filled with holographic images. Star maps, fleet movements, casualty reports written in languages the students did not recognize. "The species you call humans," Professor Velnik began, "are not evil. They are not cruel by nature. In times of peace, they are creative, curious, and often kind. But the galaxy learned, through terrible and costly lessons, that humans have a capacity that no other known species possesses." "What capacity?" Telrix asked, his compound eyes fixed on the swirling images. "The capacity for total war," the professor replied. "Other species fight for territory, for resources, for pride. Humans fight until their enemies cease to exist. Not because they enjoy destruction, but because their history taught them that any enemy who survives will one day return to threaten them again." He gestured toward a specific file in the archive. It was labeled, "The Croian Incident." "This is where it began," he said. "This is the first time the galaxy learned what humans truly were. And by the time the lesson was complete, 80 billion Croian were dead. Not defeated, not conquered, dead. Every single one of them." The students stared at the file in horrified silence. The number was too large to comprehend. 80 billion lives erased from existence. "Now," Professor Velnik said quietly, "shall we begin?" Professor Velnik activated the first historical file, and the underground chamber filled with light. A three-dimensional map of a star system appeared before the students. At its center was a small blue and green world that looked peaceful and quiet. "This is New Montana," the professor explained. "It was one of the first human colony worlds, established only 15 years after humanity joined the galactic community. The population was approximately 2 million humans. Farmers, miners, teachers, families. They had a small defense force of about 30 ships, barely enough to deal with pirates or asteroid collisions." Zixthathan studied the peaceful world. It reminded him of his own homeworld, a place where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. "The Croian Empire claimed this region of space," Velnik continued. They were a proud warrior species who had conquered 12 star systems over thousands of years. Their military numbered in the millions. Their fleet consisted of 40,000 warships. By any reasonable measure, they were one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The hologram shifted to show the Croian people. They were tall and muscular, with thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. Their faces were fierce, with sharp teeth and small red eyes. They walked upright like humans, but stood nearly 3 meters tall. The Croian demanded that humans abandon New Montana, Velnek said. They gave them 30 standard days to evacuate. The humans requested an extension to organize transport for 2 million people. The Croian refused. Curavel's crystal body hummed with confusion. But that is against galactic protocol. Civilian evacuation windows must be respected. The Croian did not care about protocol. They saw humans as weak and insignificant. When the 30 days ended, they attacked. The hologram showed the Croian fleet descending upon New Montana like a dark cloud. Thousands of warships blocked out the stars. The tiny human defense force was swept aside in minutes. Landing craft began dropping Croian soldiers onto the surface. What happened next? Omus asked, his gelatinous form trembling slightly. The Croian expected the humans to surrender. Every other species they had conquered had done so when faced with such overwhelming force. But the humans did not surrender. They could not surrender. It was simply not in their nature. The hologram zoomed in on the surface of New Montana. Zixthan expected to see humans fleeing in terror. Instead, he saw something completely different. Ordinary people were picking up weapons. Farmers grabbed hunting rifles. Factory workers armed themselves with tools. Even children were helping to build barricades in the streets. Nobody was running away. The humans organized a resistance within hours, Velnek narrated. They had no formal military training. They had no advanced weapons. But they had something the Croian had never encountered before, an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Telrix leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic images. But they were outnumbered thousands to 1. What could they possibly do? They used their primitive weapons, Velnek replied. Metal tubes that fired small projectiles at high speed. The Croian wore armor designed to stop energy weapons like plasma rifles and laser beams. They had never encountered projectile weapons before. The small metal fragments passed through their armor like it was not there at all. The hologram showed Croian soldiers falling by the hundreds. The humans fought from every building, every street corner, every hole in the ground. For every human that died, they took 5 or 10 Croian with them. The invasion of New Montana was supposed to take 2 days, Velnek said. It took 2 months. The Croian lost over 100,000 soldiers. They eventually won, of course. They burned the cities and killed everyone they could find. But their victory came at a terrible cost. And that angered the humans, Zixthan guessed. Anger does not begin to describe what the humans felt. When word of New Montana reached the rest of human space, something changed. Every human government, every corporation, every organization put aside their differences. They had only one goal, revenge. The hologram shifted to show human space. Factories that had been producing consumer goods began producing weapons. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels began building warships. Scientists who had been researching medicine began researching more efficient ways to kill. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities, Velnek explained. Since before they even knew aliens existed, they had been preparing for the possibility of conflict. Their history was filled with wars against each other. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of destruction. Now, for the first time, they turned that knowledge against an external enemy. Omus bubbled nervously. How many ships did they have? When they finally attacked the Croian Empire 6 months later, the human fleet numbered over 8,000 vessels. Not large by Croian standards, but the humans were not interested in a fair fight. The hologram showed the human counterattack. Their ships were smaller and less elegant than Croian vessels, but they were fast and deadly. They did not engage the Croian fleet directly. Instead, they struck at supply lines, communication stations, and industrial centers. The Croian tried to negotiate, Velnik said. They offered to return New Montana. They offered reparations. They offered a formal apology. The humans refused everything. What did they want? Kiravel asked. They wanted the Croian to stop existing. The words hung in the air like poison. Zixtithen felt his 3 hearts beating faster. The humans called it total war, Velnik continued. A concept from their ancient history. In total war, there are no civilians. There are no neutral parties. There are no rules except victory. The goal is not to defeat the enemy, but to destroy them so completely that they can never threaten you again. The hologram showed human forces advancing through Croian space. They did not conquer planets. They sterilized them. They did not capture populations. They eliminated them. Every factory was destroyed. Every farm was burned. Every city was reduced to ashes. The Croian fought back desperately, Velnik narrated. But they were fighting according to the rules of civilized warfare. They tried to protect civilians. They tried to preserve infrastructure. They did not understand that the humans were playing a different game entirely. How long did the war last? Telrix asked quietly. 14 months. At the end of those 14 months, the Croian Empire was gone. Not conquered. Not occupied. Gone. 80 billion Croian had lived before the war. Perhaps a few thousand survived, scattered across remote stations and ships that managed to flee human space. The hologram faded, leaving the students in near darkness. The galaxy was shocked, Velnik said. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Wars were supposed to have winners and losers, not survivors and extinct species. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss what should be done about humanity. And Zixtithen prompted. And before they could reach a decision, the second incident occurred. The Valorian blockade. It would prove that the Croian incident was not an exception. It was not an overreaction. It was simply what humans did when they felt threatened. The professor paused, his ancient eyes studying each student carefully. The Croian attacked humanity because they thought humans were weak. They were wrong. The Valorians tried a different approach. They believed humans could be controlled through economic pressure. They were also wrong. Would you like to see how wrong they were? The students nodded silently, too disturbed to speak. The professor reached for the next file. The holographic display changed to show a new species. The Valorians were beautiful creatures, with long serpentine bodies covered in scales that shimmered like precious gems. They had no arms or legs but moved with a flowing grace that made them look like living rivers of color. Their eyes were large and intelligent, and their voices were said to be hypnotically pleasant. The Valorians were master strategists, Professor Velnik explained. They had won over 300 conflicts throughout their history, and they had done so without fighting a single major battle. Their weapon was economics. They controlled trade routes, manipulated markets, and starved their enemies into submission. Zixtithen found this approach almost admirable. It seemed so much more civilized than what the Croian had attempted. After the Croian incident, the galaxy was divided, Velnik continued. Some species wanted to ally with humanity, hoping to use their military power for their own purposes. Others wanted humanity contained or destroyed before they could become a greater threat. The Valorians believed they had found a middle path. The hologram showed a map of human space. It was surrounded by a thick line of Valorian ships. 5 years after the Croian War, the Valorians established a complete blockade around human territory. No ships were allowed in or out. No trade goods could pass. No resources could be delivered. The Valorians calculated that humanity would exhaust their food supplies within 2 standard years and would be forced to accept Valorian terms. Caravel made a chiming sound of understanding. Siege warfare. Effective against most species. Very effective, Velmic agreed. The Valorians had used this strategy dozens of times before. Species with longer lifespans would eventually grow tired of hardship and negotiate. The Valorians were patient. They could wait for decades if necessary. But humans only live 80 years, Omus said. 2 years of starvation would kill many of them. Exactly what the Valorians expected. They thought this would make humanity desperate to negotiate quickly. They were wrong. The hologram shifted to show scenes from inside human space. Food was being rationed strictly. Families received barely enough to survive. Factories were converted to produce synthetic nutrients. Every scrap of biological matter was recycled and reprocessed. The humans suffered terribly, Velmic narrated. Within the first year, they lost 15% of their population to starvation and related diseases. The old died first, then the sick, then the very young. But instead of breaking their spirit, the suffering made them stronger. Telrix clicked his mandibles in confusion. How is that possible? Suffering should weaken a population, not strengthen it. You must understand human psychology, Velmic replied. Their evolutionary history was one of constant hardship. Their ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and countless wars against each other. They developed a trait that psychologists call spite. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humans do not give up. They become more determined. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The hologram showed human scientists working frantically in laboratories. They were developing something, but Zixtathan could not tell what. The Valorians sent regular diplomatic messages offering generous terms, Velmic said. They would lift the blockade if humanity agreed to limit their military to defense-only forces. They would provide food aid if humanity accepted Valorian economic supervision. Each offer was rejected without discussion. Why would they refuse help when their people were dying? Caravel asked. Because humans viewed the offers as attempts to control them, and humans cannot tolerate being controlled. They would rather die free than live under someone else's authority. This is a fundamental part of their nature. The hologram changed again to show human ships leaving their territory. Not through the blockade, but around it. The humans had discovered routes through uncharted regions of space that the Valorians had never mapped. In the 3rd year of the blockade, human strike teams began appearing in Valorian space, Velmic narrated. They were small groups, barely a dozen ships each. The Valorians were not worried. What could such tiny forces accomplish against an empire of hundreds of worlds? The answer appeared on the hologram. Human ships approaching Valorian agricultural planets, not attacking military targets, not destroying infrastructure. Instead, they were releasing something into the atmosphere. Biological weapons, Velmic said quietly. The humans had engineered a disease that specifically targeted Valorian food crops. Within weeks of exposure, the plants would wither and die. The disease spread faster than it could be contained. Omus's gelatinous body turned a sickly yellow color. They attacked their food supply? But that would cause mass starvation. That was exactly the point. The Valorians had tried to starve humanity into submission. The humans responded by showing the Valorians what real starvation looked like. The hologram displayed the spreading disaster. Valorian agricultural worlds, once covered in lush crops, became wastelands of dead vegetation. Food prices in Valorian markets increased by thousands of %. Riots broke out on major worlds. The Valorian government tried to import food from other species, but the humans had anticipated this. They attacked every convoy that tried to reach Valorian space. The Valorians finally understood that they had made a terrible mistake, Velnek said. They sent a delegation to human space, offering to lift the blockade immediately. They would pay reparations. They would provide medical aid. They would do anything the humans asked. And the humans accepted? Zixtiden asked hopefully. No. The humans demanded unconditional surrender, complete disarmament, integration of all Valorian territory into human-controlled space. When the Valorians refused these terms, the humans continued their campaign. The hologram showed the final stages of the conflict. Valorian worlds fell one by one, not to military conquest, but to famine. Billions of Valorians died in their homes, too weak to flee. The beautiful serpentine creatures, who had never lost a conflict in their entire history, were reduced to begging for scraps from species they had once considered inferior. Within 5 years, 93% of the Valorian population was dead, Velnek said. The survivors were given a choice: accept integration into human space or receive no food aid. Most accepted. Those who continued to resist were simply ignored and allowed to starve. Telrix was clicking his mandibles so fast that the sound became a continuous buzz. This is madness. The Valorians only wanted to control humanity, not destroy them. The response was completely out of proportion. By galactic standards, yes, Velnek agreed. But humans do not think in terms of proportion. They think in terms of survival and security. The Valorians had proven that they were willing to starve human children to achieve their goals. In human logic, this meant the Valorians could never be trusted. And enemies who cannot be trusted must be eliminated. Eliminated, Kiravel repeated, her crystal form dimming with distress. They use that word as if it were normal. For humans, it is normal. Their history is filled with examples of one group eliminating another. They call it by many names: genocide, ethnic cleansing, total war. Other species find these concepts horrifying. Humans find them regrettable but sometimes necessary. The hologram faded, leaving the students in darkness once again. The Galactic Council was now in a state of panic, Velnek continued. 2 major powers had been destroyed by humanity in less than a decade. Something had to be done. A coalition began forming in secret, bringing together every species that feared what humanity might do next. They planned to strike first, before humanity grew any stronger. That seems reasonable, Oma said carefully. If humans truly were this dangerous, perhaps eliminating them was the only option. Velnek looked at the young Florian with something that might have been pity. Many species thought exactly as you do now. They formed the largest military alliance in galactic history. Over 1 million warships. Dozens of species working together for the first time. They developed weapons specifically designed to counter human tactics. They studied human psychology, looking for weaknesses. They planned everything with perfect precision. The professor paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The war that followed lasted exactly 72 standard hours. It is called the 3-Day War, and it resulted in more death and destruction than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Would you like to know what happened? The students could only nod, too horrified to speak. Professor Velnek stood silently for a long moment before activating the next file. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had personally witnessed terrible things. The anti-human coalition took 18 months to prepare, he began. They gathered in absolute secrecy, communicating through encrypted channels that even the most advanced human intelligence could not penetrate. Or so they believed. The hologram displayed the coalition species. the insectoid Vorn swarm, whose hive ships carry billions of warrior drones. The mechanical syntax collective, artificial intelligences housed in bodies of pure metal. The aquatic deep swimmers, who had evolved in the crushing depths of ocean worlds and could survive pressures that would destroy most ships. Dozens of smaller species contributed whatever forces they could spare. Over 1 million warships, Velnek said. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. They planned to attack from 16 different directions simultaneously, overwhelming human defenses before they could organize a response. Every human world would be struck at once. There would be no time for their famous adaptation. No opportunity for their stubborn resistance. Zix then studied the coalition battle plans. They were impressive. Every detail had been considered. Every contingency had been planned for. It seemed impossible that any species could survive such an assault. The coalition launched their attack on a human holiday called Christmas, Velnek continued. They believed human alertness would be reduced during celebrations. The fleet entered human space at exactly midnight, standard Earth time. The hologram showed the massive armada advancing through human territory. Alarms began sounding on human worlds. Defense forces scrambled to respond, but they were vastly outnumbered. The first human colonies fell within hours. The humans had only 12 hours of warning before the coalition reached their core worlds, Velnek narrated. Not enough time to mount a proper defense. Not enough time to evacuate populations. Not enough time to negotiate or surrender. Then humanity was destroyed, Telric said quietly. The coalition succeeded. The coalition believed they had succeeded. They watched Earth and the major colonies burn. They celebrated their victory over what they called the human plague. For 3 wonderful days, the galaxy believed it was finally safe. Kiravel made a sound like breaking glass. 3 days? What happened after 3 days? On the 4th day, the dying began. The hologram shifted to show coalition space. On dozens of worlds simultaneously, strange things started happening. Stars that had been stable for billions of years suddenly flared with unusual activity. Moons that had been considered lifeless began broadcasting signals. Asteroids that had drifted harmlessly for millennia changed course and accelerated toward populated systems. The humans had a concept called mutually assured destruction, Velmek explained. During their ancient wars against each other, their nations developed weapons so powerful that using them would mean the death of everyone, attackers and defenders alike. This knowledge prevented the weapons from ever being used. The humans called it deterrence. Omis quivered with growing understanding. They applied this concept to the entire galaxy. For decades before the coalition attack, humans had been hiding weapons throughout known space. On uninhabited moons, in asteroid fields, in the outer atmospheres of gas giants, even inside the coronas of stars. These weapons were connected to a system the humans called dead man switches. The professor paused to ensure his students understood. A dead man switch is a device that activates when its operator dies. If humanity was destroyed, these weapons would automatically trigger. The humans had made it clear that their death would mean the death of everyone who had caused it. But the coalition did not believe them, Zixthan guessed. The coalition thought it was a bluff. What species would actually build such a system? What purpose would revenge serve if you were already dead? They did not understand that humans do not think of revenge as purposeful. For them, it is simply what must happen. An enemy who destroys humanity must themselves be destroyed. This is not strategy. It is instinct. The hologram displayed the chaos that erupted across coalition space. Engineered plagues were released into population centers, killing billions within days. Antimatter devices detonated inside industrial facilities, turning manufacturing worlds into radioactive wastelands. Artificial gravitational pulses tore apart orbital habitats, sending millions of bodies tumbling into the void. The Coalition lost 400 billion lives in the first week, Valnek said, his voice heavy. 12 core worlds were rendered permanently uninhabitable. The Vorn Swarm Queen was killed when a human weapon destroyed her hive ship. And without her guidance, the entire Vorn species fell into biological collapse. Billions of drones simply stopped functioning and died. Telrix was trembling, his compound eyes unfocused. 400 billion. That number is too large. I cannot comprehend it. Neither could the Coalition. They tried to find and disable the remaining human weapons, but there were too many. They were hidden too well. Every time they thought they had found the last one, another would activate somewhere else. The deaths continued for months. And the humans? Kiravel asked. Were they truly destroyed? Valnek allowed himself a grim smile. The Coalition believed so. They had burned Earth and the major colonies. They had killed billions of humans. But humans are not like other species. They do not keep all their eggs in one basket, as they say. The hologram showed remote regions of unexplored space. Hidden among nebulas and black holes were small stations, underground bunkers, and generation ships that had been traveling between stars for decades. Humanity had seeded sleeper colonies throughout the galaxy, Valmek explained. Hidden populations that the Coalition knew nothing about. Genetic repositories containing the DNA of millions of humans who could be regrown if necessary. Artificial wombs that could produce new generations without the need for survivors. They planned for their own extinction, Omus realized. They planned for everything. When the hidden colonies activated and began receiving transmissions from the dead man devices, they did not mourn. They did not negotiate. They prepared for war. The hologram showed new human fleets emerging from hidden shipyards. Not as large as before, but equipped with weapons that made the Coalition forces look like children's toys. The humans had been developing these weapons for generations, saving them for exactly this moment. The second phase of the 3-day war began 6 months after the Coalition thought it had won, Valmek narrated. By this point, Coalition space was already in chaos from the dead man weapons. Now they faced fresh human forces who had nothing left to lose and no desire for mercy. How long did this phase last? Zixthathan asked. Officially, 7 years. In practice, it never truly ended. The humans did not accept surrenders from species that had participated in the Coalition. They hunted them across the galaxy, destroying every fleet, every colony, every refuge. Some species tried to hide among neutral powers. The humans declared that any species harboring Coalition members would be treated as Coalition members themselves. The hologram showed the final disposition of the Coalition species. The Vorn swarm was extinct. Their homeworld turned into a memorial for human dead. The Syntax Collective had been dismantled, their artificial minds erased, and their bodies melted down for raw materials. The deep swimmers had been reduced to a few thousand individuals living on a single ocean moon under permanent human supervision. Every species that participated in the Coalition was either destroyed completely, reduced to a remnant population, or absorbed into human space as a subject race, Valnek concluded. The message was clear. Attacking humanity was not a strategic risk to be calculated. It was suicide. The students sat in stunned silence. The numbers were too large, the destruction too complete, for their minds to fully process. After the 3-day war, the Galactic Council understood that humanity could not be controlled through force, Valnek said. They could not be intimidated, threatened, or destroyed without consequences that would end civilization itself. A new approach was needed. What approach? Kiravel asked. They decided to ban humanity from warfare entirely. not by restricting human actions, but by prohibiting anyone else from ever giving humanity a reason to fight. The Galactic Warfare Prohibition Act was passed unanimously. Any species that attacks human interests is immediately expelled from the Council and loses all protections. They are on their own against whatever the humans decide to do. The professor deactivated the hologram and the chamber fell into darkness. "This is why humans are banned from galactic warfare," he said softly. "Not because they are evil, not because they want to destroy everything, but because when they fight, they do not stop until their enemies cease to exist. The ban exists to protect the galaxy from itself, from the temptation to threaten humanity and the consequences that would inevitably follow." "What happened next?" Zixithan asked. "How do humans live today?" Velnik nodded slowly. "That is the final part of this lesson. Come, let us return to the surface, and I will show you what humanity has become in the centuries since the ban was enacted." The elevator carried the students back to the surface. After hours in the Forbidden Archive, the warm light of the academy felt strange and foreign. Zixithan squinted his dark adapted eyes and tried to process everything he had learned. The four students followed Professor Velnik through the academy gardens. Other students passed them, laughing and talking about ordinary things like upcoming exams and weekend plans. They had no idea what secrets lay beneath their feet. "I have one question," Zixithan finally said. "If humans are so dangerous, why are they allowed to walk freely among us? I have seen human exchange students on this very campus." Professor Velnik guided them to a bench overlooking a small pond. Colorful fish from a dozen different worlds swam lazily beneath the surface. "That is the most important question of all," the professor replied. "And the answer reveals something crucial about humanity that the historical files cannot show you." He sat down heavily, his ancient bones creaking with the effort. In times of peace, humans are not dangerous. They are curious and creative. They make art that has moved entire species to tears. They develop technologies that have improved countless lives. They form genuine friendships with beings who look nothing like them. A human in peacetime is one of the best neighbors any species could ask for. Kiravel made a confused chiming sound. How can the same species be both builders and destroyers? Because humans do not see themselves as destroyers. They see themselves as protectors. Every war they have fought, in their minds, was a war of defense. The Croian attacked first. The Valorians tried to starve them. The Coalition tried to exterminate them. In human thinking, they were simply responding to threats, doing what was necessary to ensure their children could live without fear. Telrix clicked thoughtfully. So if no one threatens them, they remain peaceful. Exactly. This is why the ban was designed the way it was. It does not restrict human actions. It restricts ours. Any species that attacks humanity is on their own. They cannot call for help. They cannot claim victim status. They made the choice to awaken human nature, and they must face the consequences alone. Omus wobbled with a thought. But surely there are humans who want war, who seek conflict for its own sake. There are such individuals in every species. But human society has developed strong controls against such impulses. Their governments understand what they are capable of. Their people remember the horror of the 3-day war. They do not want to become monsters again. The ban gives them an excuse to remain peaceful. They can say, truthfully, that they are not allowed to fight. This protects them from their own darker instincts. Zixithan considered this carefully. So the ban is not a punishment for humanity. It is a gift. For both sides, Velnik confirmed. We are protected from human warfare, and humans are protected from becoming what they become in war. It is an arrangement that benefits everyone. A group of students walked past them on a nearby path. Among them was a young human female with brown hair and a friendly smile. She noticed the professor and his students and waved cheerfully before continuing on her way. "Her name is Beth," Velnek said. "She is studying xenobiology. She hopes to become a doctor who can treat species from across the galaxy. Her dream is to save lives." The students watched Beth disappear around a corner, still chatting happily with her alien classmates. "That is a human in peacetime," Velnek continued. "Helpful, hopeful, kind. She would be horrified to learn what her ancestors did. Most humans today would rather forget those dark chapters of their history. But they have not forgotten how to fight," Telrix observed. "No, that knowledge is passed down through generations. Their military academies still teach total war doctrine. Their weapons research continues in secret laboratories. Their dead man switches are still active, spread across every corner of the galaxy. If humanity is ever truly threatened again, they will respond exactly as they did before." Zixton felt a chill despite the warm sunlight. "You said their weapons are spread across every corner of the galaxy, including here. On Valoris Prime?" Velnek nodded slowly. "Our latest intelligence suggests that humanity has devices hidden in every major system in known space. If any force ever attempts what the Coalition attempted, the consequences would make the 3-day war look like a minor disagreement. Does everyone know this?" Kiravel asked. "The governments know. The military leaders know. The common people, generally, do not. It would cause unnecessary fear and could potentially damage relations with humanity. We have found it better to simply follow the ban and maintain peaceful coexistence." Almost made a gurgling sound that indicated deep thought. "So we live at the mercy of humans. If they ever decided to activate those weapons on their own, we would all die." "That is technically true," Velmek admitted. "But humans have had the capability to destroy the galaxy for 2 centuries now, and they have never used it except in response to attacks against them. They do not seek domination or control. They only want to be left alone to live their lives. As long as we respect that desire, we are perfectly safe." The professor rose from the bench and looked at each of his students in turn. "This is the final lesson of your project. Humans are not villains. They are not monsters hiding among us, waiting for an opportunity to destroy everything. They are a species shaped by a harsh history, one that taught them that survival requires absolute commitment to defense. They would prefer to never fight again. They hope the ban will last forever. But if it does not?" Zixthan asked. "Then we will learn again what the Croian learned, what the Valorians learned, what the Coalition learned. That humanity in war is the most terrifying force the galaxy has ever seen. Not because they are cruel, but because they are thorough. They do not fight to win. They fight to ensure they never have to fight again." The students walked back toward the main academy building, their minds heavy with new knowledge. As they entered the courtyard, they saw Beth the human sitting with a group of alien friends, helping one of them with their homework. She looked up and smiled at them. "Hey, you're in Professor Velnak's history class, right?" She called out. "Tough assignment this semester. Let me know if you need any help studying." Zixthan forced himself to smile back. "Thank you. We may take you up on that." As he walked away, he realized something that the professor had not said directly, but had clearly wanted them to understand. The galaxy had 2 humanities. One was Beth, sitting in the sunlight, dreaming of helping others and making the universe a better place. The other was the force that had destroyed. 3 great powers without hesitation or mercy. The choice of which humanity the galaxy encountered was not inhuman. Hands down, it was in everyone else's. Every species that had attacked humanity had made a choice. And that choice had led to their destruction. The survivors, the species who still thrived and grew and spread across the stars, had also made a choice. They had chosen peace. As long as that choice continued, Beth would remain Beth. Helpful, hopeful, kind. But somewhere beneath that smile, beneath that friendly wave, beneath all the art and science and dreams of healing, the other humanity still waited, patient, prepared, ready. Zixathan looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, hidden among those points of light, human weapons waited in silence, not threatening anyone, not demanding anything, simply existing as a reminder of what could happen if the galaxy ever forgot the lessons of history. He understood now why the Forbidden Archive existed, why these records were kept hidden from most species. It was not to protect humans from judgment. It was to protect everyone from the temptation to test whether the stories were true. They were true. And as long as everyone remembered that, peace would continue. Zixathan made his way to his dormitory, walking past groups of students from 100 different worlds. Somewhere among them, other humans lived and studied and laughed and hoped for bright futures. He would treat them with kindness, with respect, with friendship, because that was the only sensible choice, and because in the darkness of the Forbidden Archive, he had learned what happened to species who made different choices. They became history. The kind of history that was too dangerous to teach.